A little girl lay motionless with a 104-degree fever on a plastic chair at SFO, and the very man who owned the private terminal carried her into emergency care. A faint word, "Daddy," whispered through delirium, would rewrote the entire flight plan of his life. If stories of healing, truth, and second chances touch your heart, please subscribe and stay with us until the very last chapter of this journey. The rain had drummed against the glass facade of San Francisco International Airport all evening, the storm pushing in from the Pacific like a restless tide. Private Terminal G, operated by Hart Aviation Holdings, was usually a place of polished calm, executives arriving for red-eye charters, aircraft crews moving in precise choreography, every surface gleaming. Tonight, however, there was a hush that felt heavy, almost reverent. Logan Hart, founder and CEO of Hart Aviation, was not meant to be here at this hour. He had returned unexpectedly from a board meeting in New York, choosing to walk his own terminal rather than retreat immediately to his Hillsborough estate. At 42, Logan was a man accustomed to commanding both boardrooms and runways, his life divided between jets, contracts, and an empire of concrete and steel. Yet as he stepped across the concourse, it was not an aircraft or a deal that stopped him. It was the sight of a child. She was curled on the hard gray seating near gate G12, her small body folded around a threadbare stuffed rabbit. Blonde hair clung damp to her forehead. Her sneakers did not match, one pink, one faded white, and her breathing was shallow, uneven. "Hey, sweetheart, can you hear me?" Logan crouched beside her, his voice unsteady. He realized with a shock he couldn't recall the last time he'd spoken directly to a child. There was no answer. He touched her wrist lightly. Her skin burned. Years of executive decision-making had honed his instincts, risk assessments, fast calls, decisive orders. In this moment, they translated seamlessly. He stood, voice firm. "Lock down Gate G. No one in or out until medical is here. Now." Officer Daniels of Airport Police looked startled, but when Logan Hart gave an order in his own facility, compliance was immediate. Within seconds, the terminal's systems shifted into security mode. Nurse Lillian Brooks arrived from the on-site infirmary, her medical kit in hand. She knelt, assessing quickly. Temperature 104.2, tachycardic. She's severely dehydrated. An IV line was established, 0.9% normal saline bolus. Acetaminophen prepared, cooling measures applied, damp cloths, air circulation, constant monitoring for seizure risk. Logan hovered, unable to step away. The girl stirred faintly, her lips dry. Her eyelids fluttered open just enough to reveal pale blue eyes clouded by fever. And then, through cracked breath, she whispered, "Don't leave me, Daddy." The word pierced deeper than any accusation a shareholder had ever thrown, deeper than the losses he had carried in silence. Logan felt something inside him fracture. Brooks glanced up. "Sir, do you have a relation to her?" I don't know," Logan admitted, the confession foreign on his tongue. Then came the twist no crisis manual could prepare for. The infirmary system flagged the emergency blood draw. The child's type was AB negative, an extremely rare group. Within the secure donor database, one compatible match surfaced immediately. Logan Hart himself, who had once donated during surgery 3 years earlier. The coincidence was almost impossible, unless it was not coincidence at all. Logan stared at the readout, his pulse louder than the storm against the windows. A strange convergence of aviation schedules, security gaps, and medical data had led to this moment. He looked again at the girl, so fragile, yet clutching life with quiet resilience. "Get me every record. Chain of custody, no leaks," Logan instructed. "And keep her stable." His voice carried the clipped authority of a man used to controlling outcomes, but inside, he felt a tremor he could not still. As staff moved with professional urgency, Logan sat back beside the child. He brushed damp hair gently from her brow. The stuffed rabbit smelled faintly of rain. He realized he was holding his breath, as if waiting for her to speak again. The storm outside battered the bay. Jets lifted through sheets of rain, bound for Tokyo, Denver, Atlanta. But in Gate G, time felt suspended. For the first time in decades, Logan Hart, billionaire, aviation mogul, strategist of empires, was powerless, except for one choice: to stay. He stayed. The rain had eased by dawn, but the terminal still carried the hush of the previous night's storm. Private Terminal G at San Francisco International Airport, usually alive with the efficient hum of flight crews and charter passengers, was subdued, its polished halls echoing only the occasional footsteps of security staff. In the infirmary wing, the light was dimmed to a soft amber, a deliberate choice by Nurse Lillian Brooks to comfort the child still lying in the narrow hospital bed. The IV line delivered fluid drop by drop. The monitor showed a steadier rhythm now, though her fever hovered at the edge of danger. Logan Hart sat in the chair beside her, his tailored suit wrinkled from the long hours. His phone had buzzed dozens of times overnight, messages from his chief of staff, calls from New York investors, reminders of the quarterly board review. He ignored them all. His focus was entirely on the girl whose breathing he found himself counting unconsciously. When she shifted slightly, something gleamed on her chest. Logan leaned forward and noticed a silver locket tarnished at the edges. He hesitated before opening it, feeling as though he were trespassing. Inside was a faded photograph, a woman holding a newborn, smiling despite exhaustion. Written in pen on the reverse side were two words: Grace Carter. The name struck him with a force he could not explain. Grace Carter, he murmured. Avery Shaw, his personal assistant who had arrived at the terminal just before sunrise, caught the look on his face. You know her? Logan shook his head slowly. No. At least, I don't think so. But I've heard the name somewhere. Denver, maybe. Years back during an expansion project. Before he could finish, Officer Daniels entered, carrying a slim folder. Mr. Hart, we've reviewed last night's surveillance. There's an anomaly. Logan accepted the file. The report described a 10-minute blackout in camera coverage near Gate 80, an unlikely coincidence in a facility known for meticulous redundancy. The system reboot had occurred precisely when the girl appeared. Are we certain this wasn't triggered externally? Logan asked. We're investigating, but logs show a scheduled update that doesn't match our maintenance cycle. It feels intentional. Logan's instincts sharpened. Years of protecting corporate assets told him this wasn't a random glitch. Place a data retention hold on all footage. No deletions, no overrides. I want a full chain of custody from this moment forward. Daniels nodded, recognizing the tone of command. The girl stirred again, lips parting. Logan bent close, expecting another fevered whisper. Instead, her words were softer, more coherent this time. Mama said, find someone kind. The sentence froze him in place. It wasn't just delirium. It was a message, one that pierced through the fog of fever. Logan's gaze returned to the locket. Grace Carter, whoever she had been, had sent her daughter here to his terminal with a plea that resonated far beyond coincidence. Nurse Brooks approached quietly. She'll stabilize with fluids and antipyretics, but she needs observation. With her fever and dehydration, I recommend pediatric admission at UCSF Benioff. Logan hesitated. He knew the moment she was transferred, control of the narrative would begin to slip. A billionaire carrying a sick, unidentified child into a hospital would ignite speculation faster than any press release. Still, The girl's safety outweighed everything else. "I'll arrange it," Logan said firmly, "but under full HIPAA compliance. Redact her identifiers until guardianship is clarified. No leaks." Brooks raised an eyebrow, surprised by his fluency in medical privacy law. Logan had spent years negotiating contracts that touched healthcare logistics, and the terminology came naturally. He was not about to let this child become fodder for gossip blogs. As Avery packed his briefcase with the surveillance file, she asked softly, "What if she is yours?" Logan closed the locket carefully and placed it back against the child's chest. His jaw tightened. "Then I have already failed once, and I will not fail again." The room fell silent except for the steady drip of saline into the IV. Outside the window, planes roared into the sky, bound for Tokyo, London, Chicago. Yet here, in this small wing of a private terminal, the future felt grounded, waiting on the answer hidden in a name. That afternoon, Logan ordered his security director to map every trace of Grace Carter. Public records showed a patchwork life: Denver addresses, brief employment as a janitor in Aurora, a stint as a bookkeeper at a small logistics firm. There were gaps: 6-month stretches with no payroll entries, hospital bills marked delinquent. The puzzle told a story of survival on the margins. What none of the records revealed was why she had directed her daughter to San Francisco, or why the airport blackout had occurred just as the girl appeared. The pieces refused to align, but Logan knew one thing: this was not random. Someone had wanted Emma. He had learned her name from the hospital intake to reach him, whether through desperation or design. That night, while Emma slept more peacefully, Logan sat alone in the observation lounge. The bay shimmered with the lights of incoming flights. He felt the weight of the locket in his palm, the name etched into his memory: Grace Carter, Denver, Aurora. A trail of hardship leading to this terminal, to this child, and to the whisper that still echoed in his ears: "Find someone kind." For the first time in years, Logan wondered if fate, not strategy, had delivered him his most important responsibility yet. By the second day, the storm had passed, but the turbulence in Logan Hart's life had only begun. Emma had been stabilized at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital under observation for dehydration and high fever. Logan stayed longer than any CEO would normally allow himself, occupying the corner of the pediatric ward like an anxious sentinel. He answered investor calls with clipped sentences, then immediately returned to watching Emma breathe. But hospitals in California were not just places of healing. They were gateways into systems. The mandatory report had been filed: a minor in medical distress, no confirmed guardian, unclear circumstances of arrival at an airport. Within 12 hours, San Mateo County Children and Family Services, CPS, opened a case. By mid-morning, Logan found himself in a conference room inside Terminal G, facing a woman with a briefcase stacked with forms. "My name is Angela Ruiz, social worker, San Mateo CPS," she said evenly. "Under California law, Emma Carter is in emergency protective custody until we establish a safe, legal placement." Logan straightened. "She was alone in my facility. I carried her to care. I will not let her go into foster rotation." Angela didn't flinch. She had seen wealthy men argue entitlement before. "Mr. Hart, procedure requires an initial placement assessment. You may apply for temporary guardianship, but without verified paternity, the court cannot presume parental rights." Avery, his assistant, slid a folder across the table. "We've already engaged counsel. Mr. Hart is prepared to petition for temporary custody pending DNA confirmation." The lawyer who entered next was brisk, every phrase measured like a legal instrument. "We'll proceed ex parte in Redwood City Superior Court. The emergency guardianship statute allows placement with a non-relative if it's in the child's best interests." Angela opened her file. We'll need a CASA, court-appointed special advocate, to observe the placement, and a guardian ad litem will be assigned. Fine, Logan said, his tone unyielding. Appoint whoever you want. She will not be handed to strangers. The room vibrated with tension. Logan's empire had been built on acquisitions, mergers, rapid decisions under pressure. But this was not a negotiation about assets. This was about a 6-year-old girl who had whispered "Daddy" through fever. That afternoon, he entered the oak-paneled courtroom of the San Mateo County Family Law Division in Redwood City. The courthouse was modest compared to the skyscrapers he frequented, but the stakes felt higher than any board vote. Judge Naomi Feldman presided with practiced calm. Mr. Hart, the court recognizes your emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Counsel, please present. Logan's lawyer spoke with precision. Your Honor, we request immediate placement with Mr. Hart, subject to DNA testing under full chain of custody protocols. The child is medically fragile. Foster rotation risks destabilization. Opposing counsel, an attorney for CPS, interjected, while Mr. Hart's resources are noted, wealth alone cannot substitute for verified relationship. Best interest requires oversight. Judge Feldman leaned forward. Then we will craft oversight. Guardian ad litem Rebecca Green is appointed. CASA program will assign a volunteer. Placement at Hart Estate is approved on a 90-day monitored basis. DNA test to be expedited, results filed under seal. Logan exhaled slowly. The gavel struck. He had won not full victory, but a chance. After the hearing, Rebecca Green introduced herself. She was in her 40s, with a calm presence and a notebook already half filled with observations. Mr. Hart, I'll be visiting your estate weekly. My role is to ensure Emma's best interests are met, not yours. Understood, Logan replied. But inside, his determination hardened. He would prove to them, to her, to anyone who doubted, he could be more than a guardian on paper. That evening, as Emma was discharged into his care, Logan signed the placement papers. His signature had once moved millions in capital. Now it carried the weight of a promise. On the drive back to Hillsborough, Emma sat strapped in the back seat of the black SUV, her stuffed rabbit in her arms. She watched the bay lights pass by, silent but awake. At a red light, her voice came softly. Where are we going? Logan turned, meeting her gaze in the rearview mirror. Home? To my home, until the court says otherwise. Her small hands tightened around the rabbit. Is that forever? The question hung heavier than any shareholder's demand. Logan did not look away. I will not leave you. Ever! The car rolled forward into the night. For the first time, Logan realized that the custody battle was not merely in court filings or judicial orders. It was here, in fragile questions asked from the backseat of a car. It was in every promise he would make, and every action he would have to live by. And though the law required hearings, reports, and DNA results, Logan already knew the verdict he wanted. Not temporary guardianship, not 90-day supervision, but permanence. The countdown had begun, not of flight schedules, but of days until the court would decide if he was father, in fact, as well as father-in-law. The drive from Redwood City to Hillsborough wound through streets lined with oak and eucalyptus, the kind of suburban quiet that insulated Silicon Valley's wealthiest enclaves from the noise of the world. By the time the SUV pulled through the wrought iron gates of Hart Estate, the last light of evening was bleeding into the horizon. Emma pressed her forehead to the window, eyes wide at the sight of the sprawling home set against terraced gardens. To a child who had slept in airports and motels, the mansion looked less like a house and more like a storybook castle. Yet she did not smile. Her rabbit was clutched to her chest as if reminding her that safety could vanish as quickly as it appeared. Logan watched her step hesitantly into the grand foyer. The marble floors gleamed, the chandelier scattered light in dozens of directions. Normally, visitors commented on the scale, the artwork, the polished surfaces. Emma said nothing. Instead, she asked in a small voice, "Where's my room?" Logan had prepared, or at least Avery had. He led her upstairs to a bedroom at the end of the hall, where soft lavender paint covered the walls. The bedspread was pale with embroidered stars. Shelves stood empty, waiting to be filled. It was a room created in haste, but it carried intention. Not opulence, but welcome. Emma stood in the doorway, silent. "Do you like it?" Logan asked, awkward for a man who commanded boardrooms with ease. Her answer was to walk inside, place her rabbit on the bed, and whisper, "It smells like new paint." For some reason, the observation cut deeper than any critique of design. Logan realized she was cataloging details, testing whether this place could ever feel like hers. Dinner was served in the smaller family dining room rather than the cavernous hall. Logan had insisted, intuitively, that they not overwhelm her. The chef prepared simple dishes, chicken soup, warm bread, apple slices. Emma ate slowly, her eyes darting to Logan as though waiting for correction. At one point, she dropped her spoon, clattering against the bowl. She froze, shoulders tense. "It's all right," Logan said gently. He picked up the spoon himself, placed it back beside her, and added, "Happens to everyone." She nodded, but he caught the flicker of disbelief in her expression. It was as if she expected punishment, not patience. Later, when it was time for bed, Emma lingered in the lavender room. She sat on top of the comforter, rabbit in her lap, staring at the ceiling. Logan hesitated at the doorway. He had never tucked in a child. The thought felt both intimate and terrifying. Finally, he crossed the room, sat gingerly on the edge of the bed. "Would you like me to stay until you fall asleep?" Emma shrugged, but after a long silence, she whispered, "Mama used to sing when it was scary." Logan's throat tightened. He did not know the songs Grace Carter had sung, but he remembered one lullaby his mother had hummed to him in Texas decades ago. Tentatively, he began to hum the tune. His voice was rough, uneven, but Emma's eyes fluttered closed. Within minutes, her breathing slowed into sleep. He remained there long after, listening to the fragile rhythm of her rest. The following morning, the guardian ad litem, Rebecca Green, arrived for her first observation. She noted the lavender walls, the modest dinner menu, the way Emma clung to her rabbit, but looked to Logan for cues. "You're trying," Rebecca said quietly to Logan in the hallway. "That matters. But attachment isn't built overnight. Trauma-informed care means routine, reassurance, consistency." "I can give her all of that," Logan replied. His voice carried not bravado, but urgency. Rebecca's eyes softened. "Then show her, not me." That evening, Logan returned home earlier than usual, pushing aside meetings. He found Emma in the library, sitting cross-legged on the rug, flipping through a picture book far too advanced for her age. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Maps," she said simply, pointing at a page filled with oceans and flight paths. "Mama said we could go anywhere, if we had a ticket." Logan knelt beside her, tracing a line from San Francisco to Denver with his finger. "You already did something harder than flying. You found your way here." She looked up at him, blue eyes clear now, fever gone. "Is this forever?" she asked again, the same question that had hung in the SUV the night before. This time, Logan answered without hesitation. He reached for her small hand, steady and deliberate. "Yes, forever." The words landed like an oath, heavier than any corporate guarantee he had ever signed. He realized that for once, his legacy was not measured in stock or runways, but in the trust of a 6-year-old girl. That night, as Emma slept beneath lavender walls, Logan stood by the window, watching the lights of jets trace arcs across the bay sky. He had built an empire on flight, but tonight he felt grounded in a way that no altitude could replace. He whispered into the quiet as though Grace herself might hear, "I will not leave her, ever." And for the first time in years, the mansion felt less like a fortress and more like a home. A steady rain tapped against the glass walls of Hart Estate the following morning, softening the manicured gardens into shades of gray and green. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turbulence inside Logan's chest. He had spent the night replaying the fragments of Emma's whispers. Mama said, "Find someone kind," and the image of Grace Carter's name etched into the silver locket. If answers existed, they lay buried in the past. Logan's assistant, Avery Shaw, returned from a trip to Colorado with a cardboard box retrieved from a storage unit in Aurora. She set it on the polished table of Logan's private study, her expression solemn. "This is what remained," she explained. "The rental manager said the account had fallen delinquent. Most of her belongings were auctioned, but this box," he held it back. He said she asked him if anything ever happened to keep it safe. Logan opened the lid with the care of a man lifting evidence from a sacred site. Inside were modest relics, a wool scarf, hospital invoices folded into worn envelopes, a child's drawing of a house with 2 stick figures beneath a yellow sun. At the bottom lay a spiral notebook, edges curled, the cover faded. He opened it. The handwriting was delicate, pressed hard into the paper as if each word was an effort against fatigue. December 12th, Aurora. Rent late again. Worked double janitorial shift. Emma coughed all night. Doctor says it's asthma, but I know it's stress. I need to keep moving, keep working. Someday she'll know why I fought so hard. February 8th, Denver. Diagnosis confirmed. Lymphoma, stage 3. They talk in terms of months, but Emma deserves more. If I leave her with no answers, she will spend her life searching. Better she knows who she is. Better she knows him. Logan's throat constricted as he read the next entry. March 1st. I once saw him from across a hangar in Denver, Logan Hart, walking like he owned the sky. He never knew me, never knew Emma, but she has his eyes. If fate gives me no more time, then I must give her to him. Let her find someone kind. Please, God, let him be kind. The words blurred before Logan's vision. He closed the journal, pressing his palm flat against it, as though trying to still the ache rising in his chest. Emma wandered into the study just then, her rabbit dangling from one hand. She padded softly across the carpet, pausing when she saw the open box. "What's that?" she asked. "Some things that belong to your mother," Logan answered gently. Emma reached for the drawing of the house with the yellow sun. Her small fingers traced the stick figure labeled Mama. Beside it was another labeled only with a question mark. "She used to say I'd know one day," Emma murmured. "But I think I already do." Logan knelt so that he was level with her. "Emma," his voice faltered. He had addressed presidents and prime ministers with unshakable authority, but the question forming in his daughter's eyes undid him completely. Her lips trembled. "Are you my daddy?" The room seemed to shrink around them. Logan felt the journal's weight in his hand, the truth written in Grace's words pressing against his palm. Every instinct of caution, every legal counsel's warning about DNA tests and court filings fell away before the urgency in Emma's gaze. "Yes," he said, his voice low but unwavering. "Yes, I am." For a moment, Emma simply stared, as if measuring whether promises could be trusted. Then she stepped forward and placed her head against his chest, rabbit and all. Logan wrapped his arms around her, not as a corporate guardian, not as a court-appointed custodian, but as a father. That night, after Emma had fallen asleep in her lavender room, Logan sat alone with the journal again. The rain had stopped, and moonlight pooled across the floor. He reread Grace's entries, each word a mixture of resignation and fierce love. He imagined her working late shifts in Aurora, body failing but determination unbroken, carrying the weight of a child's future. He thought of the moment she had entrusted Emma to fate, whispering instructions to seek kindness, not wealth. And he realized the test before him was not legal or genetic. It was moral. Could he embody the kindness Grace had prayed for? In the quiet, Logan lifted his pen and wrote in the blank space at the end of Grace's notebook. His handwriting was bold, deliberate. You were right. She's brave. She's not forgotten. I will keep your promise alive. He closed the journal and placed it on the shelf in the lavender room, where someday Emma could read it herself. For now it was enough that she had asked and he had answered. Enough that for the first time she had called him Daddy, and he had chosen never to let go of that word. By the end of the week, the bay shimmered beneath a curtain of fog, and Logan Hart's carefully controlled world began to fray. The first crack appeared on a blog frequented by aviation enthusiasts. A grainy photo had surfaced. Logan carrying a little girl through the private terminal, her arms limp, a stuffed rabbit dangling. The caption was sensational. Who is the child in Hart's arms? Hidden heiress? By morning, the photo had spread across Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Speculation multiplied faster than flights taking off from SFO. Some posts accused Logan of hiding a secret daughter. Others suggested a corporate scandal, an affair, even trafficking. Logan read the threads in silence from his San Mateo office. He had spent decades cultivating Hart Aviation's image as the gold standard of discretion in private travel. Now that image was cracking open under the weight of rumor. His communications director, Daniel Reeves, entered with a binder of crisis scenarios. We can't ignore this, Logan. Silence will look like guilt. We need message discipline. Clear, concise, on record. Logan's jaw tightened. And if we say nothing about Emma? Then the story writes itself, Reeves warned. Reporters are already camping at Terminal G. Someone will track her to Hillsborough. We need to control the narrative before they do. The weight of the decision pressed hard. Emma was not a press release. She was a child recovering from trauma. Yet if Logan refused to speak, she would be dragged into headlines anyway. That afternoon, Logan convened his senior team in the glass-walled boardroom overlooking the bay. The atmosphere was taut. Investors worried about brand damage. Executives feared shareholder revolt. One vice president muttered, "If this child is publicly identified as his, the succession implications." Logan's voice cut like steel. She is not a business risk. She is my daughter. The room fell silent. For the first time, he had said it aloud in front of his company. By evening, the strategy crystallized. They would grant one earned interview to a trusted journalist, Jillian Monroe, anchor of a national evening news program known for integrity. There would be no staged photo ops, no exploitation of Emma's image. Logan would speak his truth, on record, and demand privacy for her in return. The following night, under soft studio lights in San Francisco, Jillian opened with a question that millions of viewers carried. Mr. Hart, America has seen the photo. Who is the little girl? Logan sat tall, the lavender tie at his neck a quiet nod to the bedroom waiting at home. He spoke with a steadiness that came not from media training, but from conviction. Her name is Emma Carter, he said. She is my daughter. I did not know she existed until a week ago, but now that I do, I choose her. Every day. The words rippled through households across the country. Jillian pressed gently. "Mr. Hart, critics argue you're using wealth to shield yourself from scrutiny. How do you respond?" Logan's gaze did not waver. "Wealth cannot erase the years I missed. It cannot erase what her mother endured alone. All I can do now is stand beside Emma and ensure she is never invisible again." The interview lasted 20 minutes. No images of Emma were shown. Jillian closed by reminding viewers of child privacy protocols. Logan thanked her, then walked out into the foggy night, feeling lighter and heavier at once. Back at Hart Estate, Emma had been shielded from the broadcast, but she sensed the tension in the air. She sat cross-legged on the lavender rug, drawing with colored pencils. When Logan returned, she looked up with wide eyes. "Were you on TV?" she asked. "Yes," Logan admitted, sitting beside her. "People wanted to know about you." Emma's pencil paused. "Did you tell them?" "I told them you're my daughter, and I told them I'm choosing you." She studied his face as if searching for cracks, then whispered, "Mama said people only like stories, not truth." Logan placed a hand over hers. "Then we'll prove her wrong. Our truth is stronger than their stories." Emma leaned against him, rabbit squished between them. For the first time since the fever broke, she smiled. The next morning, the headlines were less cruel. Major outlets highlighted Logan's words about fatherhood and responsibility. Editorials debated the balance of privacy and transparency, but one phrase repeated across platforms: "I choose her every day." The storm had not passed entirely. Shareholders demanded explanations. The board muttered about reputational risk. Yet in homes across America, grandparents and parents, widows and workers, saw not a scandal, but a man standing beside a child. And in the lavender room in Hillsborough, Emma awoke to find her father still there, exactly as he had promised. The summons arrived on crisp legal stationery, its black print stark against ivory. San Mateo County Superior Court, Family Law Division, Redwood City. The date was set. For weeks, Logan had lived in a dual reality. At home in Hillsborough, he was learning the rhythms of fatherhood, packing school lunches with Emma, reading stories before bed, finding her drawings taped to the stainless steel fridge. But beyond those lavender walls, the legal machine moved with clinical precision. CPS reports, CASA evaluations, Guardian ad litem notes, each document carried the weight of judgment. Now the reckoning had come. On the morning of the hearing, Logan adjusted his tie in the mirror. The lavender one again. It had become less an accessory and more a silent vow. Emma clutched her rabbit. Too young to attend, but old enough to sense the gravity in the air. "Where are you going?" she asked, voice small. "To court," Logan told her gently. "They're going to decide if you can stay with me." Her brow furrowed. "But you already said forever." Logan knelt to meet her eyes. "Forever sometimes has to be written down. I'm going to make sure it is." She nodded, trusting. That trust tightened his chest more than any courtroom could. The Redwood City Courthouse was modest, its brick facade softened by oak trees. Inside, however, the atmosphere was taut with formality. Families shuffled nervously, lawyers spoke in hushed tones, and the smell of paper and coffee hung in the air. Judge Naomi Feldman presided in Department 4, a room paneled in oak, its seal of California mounted above the bench. "Case number 23, FL 417, the clerk announced. In re Carter, minor child." Logan rose with his counsel. Across the aisle sat CPS attorney Dana Hughes, a stack of files before her. Guardian ad litem Rebecca Green was present, notebook open. The judge began. We are here to determine custody of Emma Carter, age 6. Mr. Hart petitions for sole legal and physical custody. Counsel, proceed. Logan's lawyer spoke first, his voice measured. Your Honor, DNA testing conducted under full chain of custody confirms paternity. Reports from CASA and the GAL indicate Emma is thriving in placement at Mr. Hart's residence. He has the resources, stability, and commitment to provide for her best interests. Donna Hughes rose. While we acknowledge paternity, we must consider Emma's welfare holistically. Wealth does not equal suitability. Mr. Hart's corporate obligations and public exposure raise questions of long-term capacity. CPS recommends ongoing supervision. The judge turned to Rebecca Green. Ms. Green, as GAL, your findings? Rebecca stood. Her calm presence filled the room. Your Honor, I have visited the Hart residence weekly. I have observed consistent routines, meals, bedtime, school preparation. I have witnessed emotional attachment forming. Emma identifies Mr. Hart as her father. While his corporate role is demanding, he has reprioritized demonstrably. In my judgment, remaining in his custody serves her best interests. A ripple moved through the gallery. Logan inhaled, steadying. Then came the unexpected. One of Hart Aviation's own corporate attorneys, present to advise on shareholder implications, requested to speak. Your Honor, with respect, granting sole custody may have financial repercussions. Should Mr. Hart's guardianship affect fiduciary duties? Logan stood before his counsel could object. No. His voice carried through the chamber. This is not about fiduciary duty. This is about a 6-year-old girl who lost her mother to cancer and found me in an airport. I am not asking as a CEO. I am asking as her father. Better to lose money than lose my soul. The courtroom stilled. Even the judge's pen paused. After a long deliberation, Judge Feldman spoke. The court finds that Emma Carter's best interests are served by awarding sole legal and physical custody to her father, Logan Hart. Placement is subject to 90 days of continued court supervision, with review hearings scheduled. CASA monitoring shall continue. So ordered. The gavel struck once. Logan exhaled, shoulders releasing tension he hadn't realized he held. He turned to Rebecca, who gave the faintest nod, approval without embellishment. When Logan returned to Hillsborough that evening, Emma was waiting in the lavender room, her rabbit seated like a sentinel at her side. Well? She asked. Logan knelt, his eyes level with hers. The judge said you can stay. You're mine. All along, you were mine. Emma let out a breath she'd been holding, then threw her arms around his neck. For the first time, her hug was not tentative. It was whole, fierce, unguarded. Logan closed his eyes, the echo of the gavel still in his ears. Forever was no longer a promise whispered in a car. It was written into law. That night, as Emma drifted to sleep, Logan stood by the window once more. The bay shimmered beneath the night sky. Jets ascended into darkness, their engines a reminder of the world that had once defined him. Now his legacy was not the planes that bore his name. It was the child sleeping under lavender walls, secure at last. And for the first time, Logan allowed himself to believe the fight was not just to win custody, but to learn fatherhood, every day, every morning, every bedtime story. The custody order had been signed, the gavel struck, but Logan Hart knew the shadows of the past had not finished trailing him. For all the legal victories, there remained too many unanswered questions: the blackout of airport cameras, the trail of hospital bills, and Grace Carter's decision to send Emma across the country. The answers arrived, unexpectedly, in the basement of his own company. Hart Aviation's San Mateo headquarters was a fortress of glass and steel, but beneath its polished lobbies lay the archives, sub-level rooms where projects long shuttered were stored under biometric lock. Logan descended the sterile corridor with Avery Shaw at his side, his badge unlocking doors in sequence. "Why are we digging here?" Avery asked. "Because Grace's path to me wasn't chance," Logan replied. "Someone knew. And if anyone had the tools to track her, it was us." Inside a room lined with dust-covered servers, Logan keyed in a code he had not used in years. Orion. Avery frowned. "That's the pilot program you mothballed in 2019. The facial recognition suite." "Yes," Logan said grimly. "Internal R&D. We tested biometric scans for FBO security. Never released it, never publicized it. But I remember. Grace passed through Denver during that window." He pulled the log files. Rows of data blinked across the monitor. Orion scan. Aurora Denver facility, 2018. Subject flagged, 74% biometric similarity to Hart Logan. The room chilled. Avery's hand flew to her mouth. "They knew." "And someone buried it," Logan said. Tracing the audit trail, Logan saw redactions, entire files sealed under a legal hold. But the metadata told another story. The lock had been placed by Elaine Mercer, then chief legal officer, and Richard Voss, a board member with a reputation for ruthless pragmatism. The timing was exact. Grace's records had been locked the same week she was treated for lymphoma in Denver. "They suppressed it," Logan murmured. "Grace must have tried to reach me. They cut her off." "Why?" Avery asked. "Because a paternity claim against me would have complicated acquisitions. A scandal before IPO. They chose reputation over truth." His voice darkened. "And a child paid the price." 2 days later, Logan flew to Phoenix, Arizona. The trail led to Rick Bledsoe, a fixer once retained by Mercer on offshore contracts. Bledsoe had been sanctioned by his former firm for coercive NDA practices, then vanished into desert anonymity. Logan found him in a sun-faded bar on the edge of the city, nursing bourbon at noon. "You always did pick quiet corners," Logan said, sliding into the booth. Bledsoe stiffened. "Hart, didn't expect you'd dirty your shoes coming here." Logan placed the Orion file on the table. "You were hired. By Mercer. By Voss. To make Grace disappear." Bledsoe's eyes flicked to the folder, then away. "She was told to sign an NDA. Walk away from a paternity petition. Money on the table. She refused." Logan's jaw clenched. "And then?" Bledsoe exhaled. "I told her she'd never win, that billionaires don't answer to janitors. But she didn't scare easy. Said she'd get Emma to you another way." He stared into his glass. "Guess she did." Logan rose, his voice like steel. "You coerced a dying woman into silence. You stood between a child and her father." Bledsoe shrugged with the hollow resignation of a man long past redemption. "I was paid to protect an empire. You've got your girl now. Isn't that enough?" Logan leaned forward, his shadow falling across the table. "Not until the truth is." Back in San Mateo, Logan convened a midnight meeting with his ethics council. The evidence was damning. Biometric scans suppressed, offshore payments routed through shell SPVs, NDAs wielded like weapons against a dying mother. He stared at the documents, rage simmering beneath the calm surface. For years, his empire had promised safety, discretion, trust. Yet in its vaults lay proof that those promises had been betrayed from within. Emma deserved more than custody orders and lavender walls. She deserved a father who would stand against the very machine that had erased her mother's voice. Late that night, Emma wandered into his study, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Daddy?" Logan closed the files quickly, softening his tone. "You should be in bed, sweetheart." "I had a dream Mama was calling me," Emma said, her rabbit dangling from her hand. "But she was far away and no one listened." Logan's throat tightened. He lifted her into his arms, holding her close. "I'm listening now. I'll always listen." Emma rested her head against his shoulder, unaware of the storm gathering around them. As he carried her back to her lavender room, Logan whispered silently into the dark. They silenced her once. Never again. Midtown Manhattan pulsed with its usual urgency. Taxis threading between glass towers, traders hunched over screens, tourists craning necks at the skyline. Yet inside the top floor of Hart Aviation's New York headquarters, the atmosphere was sharper than any trading floor. The boardroom stretched the length of the building, its panoramic windows overlooking the Empire State Building to the south. A mahogany table gleamed beneath chandeliers, and around it sat men and women who controlled billions in assets. They expected another quarterly review. Instead, Logan Hart entered carrying a leather case, his expression grim. "Thank you for convening on short notice," Logan began, placing the case on the table. His lavender tie was once again a deliberate reminder of the promise waiting in Hillsborough. "Today is not about earnings. It is about integrity." Richard Voss leaned back in his chair, smirking. "We all appreciate your moral lectures, Logan, but shareholders want results." Logan ignored the jab. He opened the case and spread a series of documents across the table. Surveillance stills from Orion, audit logs, wire transfers routed through offshore accounts. A forensic trail laid bare. "This," he said, tapping the biometric scan, "is Grace Carter. In 2018, Orion flagged a 74% similarity match to me. That data should have triggered inquiry. Instead, it was sealed." The directors shifted uneasily. Elaine Mercer, seated stiffly at the far end, avoided his gaze. Logan's voice sharpened. "This," he continued, pointing at the next file, "is the legal hold, authorized by Ms. Mercer. And this," he slid forward another sheet, "is the offshore retainer to Rick Bledsoe, the so-called consultant paid to coerce a terminally ill woman into silence." A low murmur rippled around the table. Voss scoffed. "Ancient history. You're dredging up irrelevant—" Logan cut him off. "Not irrelevant. A 6-year-old girl grew up without her father because of this. Because our company, my company, chose to bury truth under legal risk." He turned, addressing the full board. "We built Hart Aviation on discretion, on trust. If we hide from this, we betray every client who has ever walked through our terminals, and I will not lead a company with a rotten core." The independent directors conferred in tense whispers. Finally, Margaret Lynn, a respected figure known for her uncompromising ethics, spoke. "Mr. Hart, are you proposing formal action?" "Yes," Logan said firmly. "An emergency vote to remove Richard Voss from the board permanently, a full independent ethics review of legal operations, and voluntary cooperation with federal regulators through a consent decree. Transparency, no matter the cost." Gasps echoed. Consent decrees were nuclear options, public, painful, often sinking stock prices in the short term. Voss's face reddened. "You're insane. You'll tank valuation. Shareholders will revolt." Logan looked him dead in the eye. "Better to lose money than lose our soul." The words struck the room like a gavel. The vote proceeded. 3 independent directors sided with Logan, their voices firm. Voss sputtered, threatening lawsuits, but the outcome was decisive: removal. Elaine Mercer rose quietly, resignation letter already in hand. She knew her complicity was undeniable. When the dust settled, Logan addressed the shaken board. "This is not the end of Hart Aviation. This is the beginning of its redemption. We will establish whistleblower amnesty. We will audit every NDA signed under coercion, and we will enshrine child privacy protections into our corporate charter. From this day forward, our legacy will not be scandal, but reform." He gathered the files, his voice softening. "Because if we cannot protect the most vulnerable, we have no business ferrying anyone's future across the skies." After the meeting, Logan stepped onto the balcony overlooking Manhattan. The city roared below, relentless and indifferent. But for the first time in years, he felt alignment between his role as CEO and his role as father. He called home. Emma answered, her voice sleepy but bright. "Daddy, are you coming back?" "Soon," he promised. "And when I do, everything will be different. Safer. Better." "Okay," she said, then added softly, "Mama would like that." Logan closed his eyes against the city lights. So would I. Behind him, the boardroom buzzed with fallout. Ahead of him lay federal inquiries, shareholder outrage, months of rebuilding. But within him burned clarity. Emma was no longer a hidden risk to be managed. She was his compass. And with her, he would chart a course not of profit, but of truth. Spring warmed Atlanta slowly, softening the chill that had lingered in Logan Hart's chest for months. On the outskirts of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, tucked beside a small grove of dogwoods and overlooking the flight paths, a new garden had been planted. It was not large, nothing like the monuments of stone and glass Logan had once commissioned. Instead, it was simple: lavender bushes, roses, and a plaque engraved with words chosen by Emma herself. A voice the world tried to silence. "She is not forgotten." Logan stood there with Emma's hand in his, the steady roar of departing planes overhead. To most, the site looked like a quiet memorial, but to him, it was the first place where truth and healing grew side by side. The dedication was private. A few close colleagues attended, along with Rebecca Green from CASA, who had walked the entire journey with them. She knelt beside Emma, admiring the lavender blooms. "You chose well," Rebecca said. Emma smiled, clutching her rabbit. "Mama liked purple. She said it was strong and gentle at the same time." Logan felt the sting of tears but did not hide them. For too long, he had believed strength meant walls of steel, impenetrable silence. Now he knew it meant standing open, even in grief. When the small crowd dispersed, Logan and Emma lingered. She traced her fingers over the plaque, then looked up. "She's not in the sky, Daddy," Emma said softly. "She's right here." Her hand pressed against her chest. Logan swallowed hard. "Yes, she's right here, and she always will be." Back in Hillsborough, life settled into rhythms neither of them had known before. Logan learned to flip pancakes without burning them. Emma learned to ride her bike in the driveway, wobbling, determined. Together they discovered that healing was not an event but a daily practice. On Sundays, they sat at the kitchen table with waffles and orange juice. Sometimes Emma read aloud from the books filling her once empty shelves. Other times, Logan would open Grace's journal, reading passages aloud before closing with the words he had written. "You were right. She's brave. She's not forgotten." The lavender room no longer smelled of new paint. It smelled of crayons, fresh laundry, and childhood. At Hart Aviation, a reform unfolded. Whistleblowers came forward under the amnesty program. Old NDAs were reviewed and nullified where coercion was proven. The company signed a consent decree with federal regulators, pledging privacy by design for all biometric data. Share prices dipped, then recovered as trust was rebuilt. But Logan no longer measured success by stock tickers. Instead, he measured it by the mornings he found Emma asleep with a book still open on her chest, or the evenings she whispered goodnight with unguarded certainty. He had once built runways to carry strangers across the world wall. Now he built a home to anchor one small girl who called him Daddy. One evening, Emma asked to return to the garden in Atlanta. They flew together, her excitement bubbling as the plane descended. Walking again among the lavender, Emma carried a small notebook of her own. She knelt and placed it at the base of the plaque. Logan read the first page. "Dear Mama, Daddy reads to me every night. He makes pancakes even if they're messy. I think you would like him now. I'm not alone anymore. I have roots and wings." Logan's hands trembled as he folded the notebook closed. Emma slipped her small fingers into his. "See?" she whispered. "Forever." That night, back at the estate, Logan sat by the fireplace while Emma drew pictures nearby. He stared into the flames, remembering the man he had been, detached, efficient, measured by quarterly earnings. That man was gone. In his place stood a father who had walked through scandal, legal battles, and boardroom reckonings only to discover the simplest truth. Legacy was not steel or contracts. Legacy was a child safe enough to dream. The lavender flames reflected in his eyes as Emma climbed into his lap, rabbit in tow. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "About how grateful I am," Logan answered. "For you, for her, for this." Emma leaned against him, her eyelids heavy. "Then don't think too much. Just stay." Logan smiled. "I will, ever and always." The fire crackled, steady as a heartbeat. Outside, jets carved lines across the night sky. But for Logan and Emma, the world was no longer defined by departures. It was defined by presence, by a garden, a room painted lavender, and the promise that truth, once spoken, could never again be silenced. And so their story, born in the storm of an airport terminal, ended not with takeoff, but with homecoming. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing so together we can keep sharing stories of hope, healing, and second chances.